right. So like I said, we have with us today ladies from the Great Minds Company with their curricular resources called Ph.D. Science. We have Diane DePaffy, and Diane is our Ohio Account Solutions Manager for Great Minds. She is an Ohio native, whoop, whoop, and a former teacher and school administrator. And we also have with her Meg Goodner, and Meg is the Ph.D. Science National Director for Implementation Services. And Meg has been a part of Ph.D. Science since its inception. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for hanging with our Ohio teachers, and take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having us. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Diana, and joining me, I have actually two colleagues on the call. One is my counterpart. Her name is Annie McKimmey, and she works with me. So generally with every school system in the state, if you're not working with me, you're working with Annie. So the two of us are really there to help guide you through anything that you would want to do with our products. We do have Eureka Math, Wit and Wisdom, Geodes, and Ph.D. Science. So today we're here to share with you information about Ph.D. Science. And in each one of our curricula, we have a content expert. So Meg Goodner is the content expert for Ph.D. Science, and she will be doing our presentation today. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Myself and Annie will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. Meg, it's to you.
Thank you, Diana. I just want to make sure you can see the screen with the windmills moving.
Yep, we can.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys again for having us here today. And we're here to talk to you about high quality science curriculum and what tools we have, and all available for free, that can be utilized and leveraged in your Ohio primary classroom. So first, we know that having high quality science resources leads to an engaged classroom. It sparks curiosity in our students, and it leaves them making connections to the world around them. However, a 2018 study from Horizon Research Incorporated found that in grades K through 3, science was being taught for just 18 minutes per day on average, compared to 89 minutes for ELA and 57 minutes for mathematics. So could we go ahead and get that poll going, where we want to know, on average, how often are you teaching science each week? So while you complete that poll, I'll continue. All elementary students need more science instruction, especially those in the early grades. And by creating time for this instruction, schools give students the opportunity to scaffold their future learning and build knowledge gradually, rather than entering more intensive science classrooms in middle school with little to no prior knowledge to draw on. So a strong knowledge building science curriculum in the early grades not only starts that knowledge building process early, but it also engages our students when they are their most curious. And if our students don't encounter meaningful science instruction until middle school, their interest may wane, as well as a variety of other things that we can talk about in a minute. So let's go ahead and close our poll and find out, on average, how often are. Okay, every day, 50%. All right, that is much higher than our average, as you just heard. But yeah, some 2 days, some 3 days, the remaining 50% kind of split between that. And that's honestly what we see across the country with all of the districts that we support, is that in K2, there's definitely a lack of science instruction that happens in K2. So in addition to you engaging students at K2 when they're their most curious, it also, it builds that knowledge, right? That content knowledge. You start to build those transferable skills, those practices that many scientists and engineers engage in, but you're also impacting career pathways from a very young age. And that could seem a little premature, but it's really not. In fact, the Pew Research Center wrote in a 2018 report that many STEM professionals believe that Black and Hispanic individuals are underrepresented because of limited educational opportunities. And a major portion of them, 52% of those same STEM professionals, believe that a major reason for this underrepresentation is because Blacks and Hispanics are less likely to have access to a quality education that prepares them for these fields, right? They're not being encouraged at a young age to pursue STEM related subjects. So in addition to, the building of knowledge, the gradual implementation of science processes and skills, in addition to starting that love of science way young, and also how science can blend beautifully and support math and ELA and other subject areas, there's a lot of reasons that K-2 students need science. So let's kind of fast forward and talk about that a little bit. All right, here we go. Throughout today's presentation, I would like you to consider how are you currently meeting the needs of science instruction in your lower elementary classrooms? And do your teachers have the high quality resources necessary to provide an engaging experience so the teachers can continue to reach and inspire their students in years to come? So first, let's talk about what it means to be high quality. A high quality curriculum is generally defined as curricular materials that are first and foremost aligned to the latest research and standards. Of course, these curricular materials allow for teachers to hone their craft during instruction. They support equity for all students, and they foster an active learning environment for students as well. So we are proud to be rated as high quality through various curriculum evaluators, including the Louisiana Believes Project. And we are anxiously awaiting our Ed Report score we submitted 2 years ago. So just hoping that that will come through here any day. But let's talk about how these more general tenets actually translate into science specifically. Okay, so in the area of science, with the shifts called for by the next generation science standards and a framework for a K through 12 science education, high quality science materials possess three-dimensional learning, student-driven learning using phenomenon and hands-on investigations. The three dimensions of learning are coherent throughout grades, throughout modules, throughout grade bands. In addition, the materials facilitate teacher learning, where the shifts in pedagogy are supported so that teachers are empowered during their instruction. And then other instructional supports are included as well to further empower teachers and ensure that ultimate student success. So if this is the bar that has been set for defining high quality science materials, Ph.D. has raised it. And let's dive in to see how Ph.D. checks these boxes and more. So PhD science was not retrofitted to acknowledge the next generation science standards. In fact, it was built for the next generation science standards. Three-dimensional learning is at the heart of our curriculum, and our curriculum was written from the start to help students uncover these disciplinary core ideas by engaging with the science and engineering practices and using the lenses of the cross-cutting concepts to make sense of phenomena. With PhD science, students will take a deep dive into each anchor phenomenon as they explore building enduring knowledge of core science topics through hands-on investigations. So what does that look like up close within PhD science? Well, we're a phenomenon-based curriculum. You'll hear a lot about phenomena throughout today. So in each module, our students are asking questions as they investigate real-world authentic phenomena and use those phenomena to understand core science concepts. As I mentioned, the phenomena they're investigating is real. So we want them to have real experiences alongside of it. We don't want them in front of a simulation or reading about science. We want them really doing science, digging in and experiencing it firsthand. I've seen this personally come to life in so many classroom observations where our students are incredibly engaged because they are doing that science, right? The classrooms are loud and they are messy, but there's so much excitement from students because they're able to build models and investigate and sometimes literally get dirty and collaborate with their peers. And as we talked about at the beginning of the call, students are naturally curious about the world around them. So when you give them a curriculum with which they're able to explore that natural curiosity, it really sparks that interest in and that love of science from a very young age. All right. Moving along, in a student-driven environment, teachers facilitate learning, but students own it. So students are driving the learning so they can find answers to the questions that they ask about the world around them. And it's this three-dimensional approach to teaching and learning that, when implemented effectively, allows students to develop problem solving and critical thinking skills that go well beyond passing a test for a single science lesson. So what does that look like up close? Well, in each module, our students are asking questions as they investigate these authentic phenomena, and they're using those questions, those investigations, those hands-on experiences to understand core science concepts. And so they're not just doing that with these hands-on opportunities, but they're doing that in some really basic ways, like with asking questions. Students are creating driving question boards, and they have opportunities to notice and wonder, and their wonderings give them opportunities to practice that SEP of asking questions. Of course, we're always encouraging our students to gather evidence and making those evidence-based argumentations. They're developing real world models. So some are three-dimensional, like as in three-dimensional, as in physical models, right? Some are drawn models. There's a variety of ways that students are creating these models to better understand these authentic phenomena and these supporting phenomena. And they're also constructing explanations. So they're really engaged in those three dimensions, but specifically engaging with those science and engineering practices each and every single day so that they can better construct those scientific explanations for why the world ultimately works the way that it does. So, you know, in addition to the practices, in addition to the three dimensions, it's really important that you think about how knowledge is building in this student-driven environment throughout all grade levels, but also all modules of PhD science. So we'll take a look at our module map. So this is the module map for levels K through 2 of PhD science. And we are really looking at this to demonstrate that coherence and that scope. The most exciting part is that our levels K2 are available as an open education resource. So more on that later. But here you can see the science topics that students will be covering to build science knowledge over an entire year, as well as the anchor phenomenon that they will be studying. So our team, our content team, carefully selects the topics to be relevant to students so they can serve as a point of entry to help them understand core science concepts. So as I mentioned, we do focus on unique, authentic phenomena. We do look at real places that students may or may not have heard of, or real events that they can learn more about. And so sometimes it's easier to use invented phenomena so we can control all those variables involved. But we know that by connecting a lesson on weather to the shelter or the cliff dwellings of the Mesa Verde, as an example, that students have an opportunity to see how weather patterns and severe weather impacted the ancestral Pueblo people. And it gives them this more solid connection to how the cliff dwellings at the Mesa Verde protected those ancestral Pueblo people from the weather. So the curriculum has a coherent storyline across all lessons, lesson sets, and modules, but the coherence doesn't really stop there. We also make these connections across grade levels. And so I really love a lot of the amazing phenomena that we have chosen to highlight in K2, from tugboats moving cargo ships in New York Harbor to Wayang shadow puppetry or the recycled orchestra of Katora, You can see that students are starting to build knowledge of pushes and pulls, that physical science, those physical science DCIs in kindergarten. And then they continue to build on the knowledge that they've learned by exploring light and by exploring sound and ultimately by exploring matter there in 5th grade with exploring different birds' nests. And so they realize that, you know, every bird makes their nest of different materials, and why is that, and how does structure and function and all of that kind of come into play with matter. So there definitely is this coherent scope within a grade level as well as within a grade band. Okay, so with PhD Science, we have designed all of our curricula to be accessibly rigorous. And so what does that mean? Well, we want to maintain the learning design of PhD Science, but make sure that it approaches learning in a way that is accessible to our students. In kindergarten, accessible means, you know, supporting their developing reading and writing skills, but it also means supporting their attention span. So with levels K through 2, our lessons are 35 minutes long with a launch, learn, land structure. You'll find about 25 to 30 lessons in a module. And and 4 modules per grade level. So that brings you to about 100 lessons per year, which kind of plays back into the question I asked at the very beginning of the call. You know, with 100 lessons per year and approximately 180 days of school, you've got flexibility and you have the ability to hopefully progress through maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe all 4 modules. But just because we understand that that's where science education is these days. And so we've ensured that the structure, the program structure really will meet the needs of K2 teachers, no matter where they are and no matter how many minutes of science they have each day. Okay, in addition, let's look at a questioning structure, and that's what kind of you're seeing here. Our students' quest for knowledge is never ending, and we know that gathering evidence builds knowledge. So with every question that our students answer, it's going to lead them to more questions, which allows them to further investigate different topics. So students are actually weaving this story and building an understanding with every lesson. Ultimately, it's with all the questions that they ask and all the evidence that they've gathered and all the new knowledge that they've developed that they can provide an evidence-based answer to each module's essential question. So shown here is the questioning structure part of it from level 1, module 2. And we're gonna take some time to dive a little bit deeper into this particular module to look at how students are building that knowledge. So you can advance. Thank you. So in level 1, module 2, students are learning about wayang shadow puppetry, which is an Indonesian shadow puppet show. So you can click observe images of shadows inside and shadows outside. They are identifying light sources in the classroom, light sources outside of the classroom, and observing shadows in the classroom as well with the light sources on and off, to establish that shadows appear in places with light. So we want students to develop the enduring understanding that the way light interacts with objects affects what people see. And so we accomplish this by exposing students to this unique phenomenon as they observe images and videos of wayang shadow puppet or wayang show people using shadows to tell stories on a screen. So you can click. Students continue their investigation of this ancient art by reading the authentic trade text Blackout, as well as thinking of how light affects the visibility of objects. Students are comparing models. You can click of different rooms to determine that the objects are visible when light okay, whatever. Students are comparing models of different rooms to determine that objects are visible when light illuminates the objects or when objects give off their own light. And ultimately, students compare different shadows to identify the three parts that form a shadow. So now you can click. Students are using these shadows to identify the three parts that form it. And that would be an object, a surface, and a light source, right? So when students are observing these different objects and surfaces and light sources, they're doing it in different orders and in different positions to determine that shadows form when objects block light from reaching surfaces. You can click. Students then learn about Rukjon, I can't ever say it, Norway, but it's this cute, quaint little town that is shaded by mountains during winter months. So students are observing models of the town to determine that mirrors can actually redirect light. And they use this knowledge to explain and understand how engineers to this day use mirrors to redirect sunlight into this town during winter months. So this is just one of those real world applications for our students that we're allowing them through a supporting phenomena to better understand the piece of this bigger phenomenon, which is the Wayang shadow puppet shows. You can go to the next slide. And one of my favorite components of PhD science is the inclusion of a science or engineering challenge in every module. So in this module, students are completing a science challenge to identify the materials that work well as Wayang screens. So students are observing photographs and videos to identify that light is traveling through the screens in these shows. And it leads them to wonder about how light interacts with different materials. You can click which the class is then investigating all the different materials and kind of using a light meter to identify and record how much light travels through different types of materials. So ultimately, they're gathering this data, they're getting this evidence, and they're testing materials to use as a Wayang screen. And ultimately, this challenge culminates with students presenting their selected screen materials in class presentations. All of this exploration and investigation ultimately allowing our students to apply their learning about light interactions to construct a scientific explanation to the essential question, how do puppeteers use light to tell stories during Wayang shows? So that's just kind of like a big picture feel of what it's like to go through an inquiry driven, student driven, phenomenon driven, three-dimensional module. And I encourage you guys, we'll talk in a second about how to access the open education resource, but it's really amazing to see how our content team took these standards and bundled them in a way and then found these amazing authentic phenomena, which really allows students to kind of drill down, go deeper, and ultimately understand the workings of the phenomena, but these core science concepts. So we'll move along to program materials because it's not just about how the curriculum feels and what it can do for your students, but it's also about how we support teachers and administrators in implementing this curricula. Each module has a teacher edition, and the teacher edition is rich with resources and supports to help teachers facilitate every lesson. And that includes just-in-time notes, which we will talk about in just a bit. So lots of resources in the teacher edition to help teachers with the comfort and confidence it requires in terms of science content knowledge, background knowledge, processes, understanding the three dimensions, all of that. So moving along to the Science Logbook, this is a consumable item and students have one to accompany each of the 4 modules in a grade level. You can advance the slide. Students use it to make observations, generate ideas, ask questions, synthesize information, plan investigations. It's really how our students learn to think and act like real scientists. And so we've got this Science Logbook for all grade levels, but in K2, there are some really awesome accommodations that are made for emerging, readers and writers. And so we'll talk about those in a minute, but The purpose of the Science Logbook is so it's there and students can really own it, and with the appropriate scaffolding, you know, jot down all of these things and kind of use the logbook as if a scientist or engineer would. Next slide. So PhD projected as a digital resource, and that's going to provide teachers with slides to support each module. So we've got a lot of images that we reference. We have some videos and other resources that we utilize in the teacher edition. And this resource, PhD projected, will allow teachers to easily project this content for the entire class to view. Next slide, we've got core text. So content area connections are so huge, and I could talk all day about how skills and processes that students are learning and engaging with in science supports other content areas, right? But one of the most clear content area connections that we make in every single module is the use of supporting authentic trade text that have been selected to serve the purpose of allowing students to, yes, practice their literacy skills, but also deepen their understanding of an anchor phenomenon, or a supporting phenomenon, or even the engineering design process. We use core text in a variety of ways. And so in some modules, these texts are read together as a class, and in others, they're read within student groups. But definitely an awesome explicit content area connection to English language arts is the use of these core texts. So next slide, we've got hands-on investigations that are an integral component of PhD science. We do sell materials kits, and each kit is going to include those consumable and non-consumable items. Our program materials continue on the next slide with student science packs. These are consumable and non-consumable resources, and these are designed to just ease implementation. So if you're thinking, you know, we don't have a lot of money at K2, and you know, we want to get some high quality resources in our teachers' hands, there are so many ways that we can do that. And these student science packs are awesome, but they're just really designed to ease that implementation. And then assessment packs, same thing. We have colored copies of all the assessments, just an element that's designed to make implementation easier for teachers, but certainly not a huge key component. And while we're on the topic of assessments, I did want to quickly highlight, this is a question we get all the time, and there's so much. You can go to the next slide. There's so much I could say about assessments, but we want to make sure our students are building knowledge of concepts and not just memorizing science facts. So we have multiple types of assessment opportunities that happen throughout the module. There are checks for understanding. Those happen once per lesson, and there's specific evaluation guidance of what evidence to look for and what next steps to take for remediation. So there's a check for understanding once per lesson, but that real explicit guidance, that robust check for understanding, happens about once per lesson set with that guidance. But we are explicitly honing in for teachers on what they should be seeing and how they can remediate if they aren't seeing those items. Additionally, each module has 2 to 4 conceptual checkpoints. Same thing, these also have those evaluation guidance pieces, those next steps for remediation. And these occur at the end of a concept to assess a student's mastery of skills that are identified in that concept standards. Each module has a science or engineering challenge, as I've already mentioned, one of my favorite components, and that allows our students to apply their knowledge to solve a problem. And there is a rubric, an evaluation rubric for each challenge. And last but not least, the end of module assessment also includes a rubric. It gives students an opportunity to apply the knowledge they've developed over the course of the module in new context as they explain supporting or related phenomena, assessment phenomena. So always with that application piece in mind. You can go to the next slide. Here's the most exciting part of our presentation today, is that recognizing that science can be a lower priority in K through 2 classrooms, right? Recognizing that teachers don't have funds or sometimes time, and just recognizing that really students deserve a comprehensive, high quality curriculum at K2. We have decided to release levels K through 2 as an open education resource. So we want to make sure that our youngest students have access to a coherent and complete curriculum rather than them engaging in isolated investigations or isolated learning. So that our levels K through 2 teacher edition and science logbooks are all available as free downloadable PDFs through our website. And they are ready for implementation in this next school year. So teachers can go ahead and download those teacher editions, those science logbooks, start to learn more about PhD science, start to see some of the modules maybe at a more detailed level, and ultimately implement as they see fit. Next slide, please. So we'll also have print materials for purchase for those districts who would like to purchase the science logbooks and the teacher edition. And of course, we've got our materials kits and core text available as well. Please go back. And thank you. So with the science logbooks, they are tailored to their age group. So as I mentioned earlier, there's that accessible rigor in mind. And we do pay very close attention to the reading and writing that our K2 students are doing. So we're going to consider their grade level literacy skills. We're going to use icons and pictures and simple sentences and decodable words that allow them to really utilize that logbook. And so a teacher could still read out loud some directions, but the accessible text is going to encourage our students to apply their developing literacy skills right in their science logbook. Students are completing more complex reading and more complex writing as their literacy skills are growing. So you can see the temperature page, that's a kindergarten page. And then the page all the way to the right, predict what will happen, is a first grade logbook page. And then ultimately this observe sand is a second grade logbook page. So you're seeing that in the earlier grades, our students are doing more annotating, more drawing to show their thinking. But as their literacy skills are developing, they can share their thinking using more complex writing. And the scaffolds and supports in our science logbook allow for that. Next slide. Another item that we have created with this accessible rigor in mind is our knowledge decks. And so these knowledge decks were created to make our knowledge accessible for our K2 students. But ultimately, you know, we really believe in authentic trade texts and the use of those, but it's very difficult to find authentic trade text at a kindergarten through second grade, you know, level. And so we were able to carefully create these knowledge decks. There's actually two types of product within these decks. There is a larger poster that a teacher would use from year to year. So it's a non-consumable, and that large poster has this informational text combined with all these beautiful images. And then there's a consumable part for students. So actually you'll see, so there's the picture, right? And then below the picture with that longer text, that's something that a teacher would read to students. Whereas the text on the left is text from the student facing cards, right? So making sure that students can read their text, that teachers are able to provide additional information by reading the longer, lengthier text to their students. And ultimately, we've got these posters that are these non-consumable pieces, but these consumable pieces that substitute different knowledge in trade books and investigations. And students are interacting with these cards during lessons, collecting this deck of knowledge about different phenomena throughout the school year. So very exciting you know, development for specifically our K2 students. And then we can go to the next slide where we're going to revisit this high quality checklist to see how else PhD science checks the boxes. So we know that with the pedagogical shifts required of high quality science curricula, teachers need additional support, right? They need to be able to effectively implement in their classrooms, and they are craving guidance to support them in doing that. And so our teacher edition includes many module level, lesson set level, and lesson level instructional supports that facilitate teacher understanding. For the purposes of our time today, we'll review just a few of them, but I really could talk about all the supports for an hour alone. So here we've got, can you please go back, our additional reading for teachers? Thank you. Each module is going to begin with a module overview, and our module overviews have a long list of module specific supports for teachers. We've got detailed module maps that cover performance expectations and dimensions. We've got information on how students are building knowledge on particular science topics across grade levels, safety considerations. But one of my favorite pieces is that we've cultivated additional reading for teachers to strengthen their knowledge of science concepts, so they have the background knowledge and the comfortability with the content needed to step into this role of facilitating a student-driven classroom. Next, please, another module resource that strengthens teachers' understanding of how our students are building knowledge is our module storyline. So this is Appendix B. It's an entire appendix, an entire resource that provides a brief synopsis from a student point of view as it details what knowledge students are building and how they're building it, right? So through the different investigations, the text analysis, the science discourse, we're very clearly outlining that for our teachers. And click, please, my last but not least favorite educational component is these lesson level supports called our just-in-time notes. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier on the call, but these notes exist in the right-hand margin of every page, and they are designed to help teachers facilitate learning that will lead our students to developing the knowledge they need to answer the essential question. But they're designed as these like extra little tidbits, right? So we're keeping the focus of the inline portion of the TE all on the learning, all on the facilitation. And then we're providing these just-in-time notes out to the side. This particular screenshot, these particular examples show just some of the different types. So we've got a spotlight on disciplinary core ideas, informing teachers of the 3 dimensions and how they're at play in that lesson set. We've got notes that help teachers guide conversations as students share observations. We have notes on Spanish cognates or sentence frames to scaffold conversations for our multilingual learners. Ultimately, we know that not all elementary science teachers are science specialists. The supports that we are providing in our teacher edition help them feel more comfortable and confident, ultimately, not just with the content, but all the instructional practices that we're asking our teachers to shift to with high quality 3-dimensional curricula. So we're almost at the end here. Can we please advance the slide? Thank you. In addition, I wanted to point out we've got free resources. So first of all, we've got this open education resource. It's free. You can access it at greatminds.org. But we also have what we call the Teacher Resource Pack, and you can access all of these resources for free from our website by creating an account at greatminds.org and searching for the PhD Science Teacher Resource Pack. Our implementation guide is an incredibly comprehensive document for all things about the learning, design, and pedagogy of PhD science. Our preparation and pacing guides are incredibly actionable resources for teachers, helping them determine what they need to prepare, but also how they can maximize science time with what they've got. We have family tip sheets available in English and Spanish. We have materials checklists. We have documents that help teachers better understand key parts of our module structure. And we've ultimately got very active social media groups. I see Jeannie Albina on the call. She's kind of spearheading the revamping of those. They've been wonderful, engaging places where we get to interact with implementers, but also implementers get to interact with each other and share ideas. The next slide talks about our professional learning. We've got a wide range of professional learning sessions, PD sessions, coaching sessions, and some are shown here. This scope that you see on the screen is really created to support new teachers and administrators who are new to the program. And we've also got other tracks, of course, that grow and evolve alongside teachers as they continue to develop and hone instructional techniques well beyond their first year of implementation. Next slide, please. So, I hope you've seen today that PhD science certainly exhibits all the components of a high quality curriculum, and it has raised the bar more recently by allowing for these materials to be accessible for both hybrid, you can click, and virtual instruction. So we've got a distance learning component that allows our students to continue building knowledge wherever learning must take place. For the purposes of today, we don't have any more time. We will not dive into the specifics of PhD science in sync, but just know that no matter the situation that will arise in the coming weeks, coming months, coming years, we do have that distance learning companion product that also supports our high quality science product. So you can click, Diana, and then this is really it. For more information on PhD Science in Sync, or for more information about InSync in general or open education resource, anything that you guys need, you can contact Diana. Her email address is here, and I'll also place it in the chat.
And Meg, we do want to leave a little bit of time. I think we only have about 6 minutes, and we want to leave some time for some Q&A also.
Absolutely, we are ready. So any questions that we have?
So earlier in the chat, I did post the website address as well as the one that gets you directly to science. So that is where you can find the materials that Meg was talking about. And then does somebody have a question? I think I heard somebody start.
No, I was just telling folks that they can either put their question in the chat box or feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question. All right. Well, I want to thank you, ladies, for sharing this with us. I was really excited to hear about this and the resources for K2. And you do obviously have other curricula available, not just K2. So all through the curricula, but particularly with the K2 resources being free of charge. Definitely, I encourage all of you to check it out. The recording of this will be made available on our website. It'll probably be up in about a week, along with the slide presentation that they shared with us today, so that you guys can access that and share it with your colleagues, your administrators, whomever you think needs to hear it in your sphere. Kathy put a link to the exit ticket. Go ahead and fill that out to give us some feedback on the session, but also it'll give us your contact information if you want a certificate for your time with us today. So go ahead and put that in there as well. But again, thank you so much for sharing, Meg and Diana and Annie, for spending some time with us. This is a really cool resource.
Thank you for inviting us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. And we're here to help. So if anybody has any questions, please just go ahead and email. If you want us to send you links for the free resources or whatever, just please, send us an email and we'll get to you.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I believe this concludes our sessions for science for today. We will be back on here in the morning. The keynote begins at 8:30. And then we'll actually be having an open forum after that, just to kind of discuss the keynote. The keynote tomorrow is TNTP, and they'll be talking more about the opportunity myth. And so we'll be having some discussions after that and more great presentations. So pop back in and see us tomorrow if you have the time available. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, thanks.